Last night was supposed to be ordinary, just a late meeting, a stack of notes, and a quiet walk home. But under a flickering streetlight, with a borrowed coat over my shoulders and rain starting to whisper on the sidewalk, my boss asked one question that turned the night into something I didn't see coming. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't scandalous. It was simple, steady, and it changed the way I see myself and him. Before we dive in, do me a favor. Tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in. New York, Phoenix, Dayton, wherever you are. I'm glad you're here. I'm Pamela, 52, the kind of woman who keeps extra tea bags in her purse and remembers everyone's dietary preferences long after HR forgets. I work in operations, schedules, budgets, the unglamorous spine of the office, and my boss, Justin, is the calm in our storm. Mid-50s, neat silver at the temples, the type who asks questions instead of making speeches. He's not flashy. He's the person you want beside you when the projector fails 5 minutes before the board arrives. That night, the board meeting ran long. Numbers and forecasts and the peculiar tension that clings to conference rooms after 8 p.m., when the last slide finally clicked off, it was just the two of us and a cleaning cart humming somewhere down the hall. I packed my binder, rubbed the bridge of my nose, and tried not to think about the chilly walk ahead. "Pamela," he said, sliding his laptop into its sleeve, "which direction are you headed?" "Maple and 3rd," I answered. "About 12 blocks." He lifted an eyebrow. "That's my path most nights. Let me walk you." He asked it like an offer I could refuse, and I liked that. I checked the clock, the dark windows, my stubborn pride about being independent, and then I nodded. "Thank you. I'll take the company." We rode the elevator down, listening to the soft clang of old cables, the building's version of a goodnight lullaby. In the lobby, the security guard waved and said, "Stay warm out there." The revolving door pushed us into the street's cold breath. I pulled my cardigan tight. Justin shrugged off his overcoat and held it out. "Take it," he said. "You'll be negotiating with the wind the whole way." "I'm fine," I tried. But the wind made its case by slipping under my sleeves, and the coat smelled like cedar and clean laundry. I slid into it, and the lining held the day's heat like a favor. We started walking. Traffic had thinned to a hush, the kind the city keeps for itself when it thinks no one is listening. Storefronts were asleep behind their grates. A diner at the corner still spilled warm light and the scent of onions onto the sidewalk. We didn't talk for half a block, the way people who've worked side by side can share quiet without it turning heavy. Then he said, not as a boss but like a neighbor out for a late stroll, "That final slide you added, the one showing staffing gaps and cross-training, that shifted the conversation." I wasn't sure it was the right moment, I admitted. I didn't want to step on anyone's toes. "Please step on mine when it makes the plan better," he said, almost amused. "I like my toes right where sound ideas put them." I laughed. Noted. The first raindrops arrived, the kind that tap your face like a question. We turned our collars up, and he adjusted his pace to mine without making a ceremony of it. We passed a bookstore that always keeps its holiday lights up year-round, the tiny bulbs shining like remembered birthdays. I found myself telling him about my Saturday ritual, eggs at the diner, a browse of the bookstore, then home to reshelve the cookbooks I swear I'm going to use more. He told me about his father, how the old man used to hold court at a hardware store, could find the exact bolt you needed by sound alone. "He'll be 80 next month," Justin said. "Still says no one measures twice anymore." "Your father and my sewing teacher would have gotten along," I said. "She kept a jar of buttons from garments older than I am. Said every saved button was a lesson." things come back around. We hit a patch of sidewalk broken by a maple root, the kind that jars your ankle if you don't look down. He reached out, a quick, careful gesture, fingers hovering near my elbow. "May I?" "Please," I said, and felt how that small consent changed the air between us. His hand was steady. No squeeze, no claim, just anchoring. We walked on, the rain growing more serious. I could feel my hair loosening into the damp and decided to stop caring. There are freedoms at 52 the brochures never promised. Not apologizing for a cardigan, not pretending your shoes don't pinch, learning how to accept a coat with thanks instead of a joke. "Can I say something that isn't very managerial?" he asked, scanning my face. "And you have all the permission to tell me I've overstepped." "You can try," I said, curious. "I'm impressed by how you carry people through a tough room," he said. "Tonight, half those questions weren't about data. They were about fear. You saw that." It wasn't flirtation, not the way I've known it. It was attention, a clean line drawn around something I was proud of. I felt it glow in me like a stove coil warming up. "Thank you," I said. "Sometimes I think what I'm good at doesn't have a name." "It does," he said. "Leadership with a memory." We paused at a crosswalk where the signal always takes too long because the city can't be rushed, not even when you are wet and ready for tea. A bus sighed to a stop. Emptied 2 college kids who ran through the rain laughing as if their bodies were champagne. I thought of being that age and then, somehow, thought of being exactly this age and how my laugh has lower notes now that I wouldn't trade for anything. "Do you ever feel," I asked him, "that the world becomes a little too polite with you after 50? Like people are afraid to ask about the real things?" He considered. "I feel we're given the 'you've seen things' nod, and then everyone rushes to the next task. But the real things are still there. They're just quieter." "The quieter things," I said, "are often the ones that last." We crossed. A dog barked from a balcony where someone had forgotten a plant to the mercy of the weather. Justin told me he'd started cooking more, simple, useful meals. My mother used to say a home is the place where someone is thinking about your dinner. I'm trying to be that someone for myself. "I like that," I said, and meant it. There's a steadiness in feeding yourself on purpose. We reached my block, where the houses are old enough to have seen many lives, but not old enough to be precious about it. My porch light had burned out again. I made a note in my head to change it, and the note had the weary voice of every note I'd made about it for weeks. "Wait here," Justin said, stepping into the bodega at the corner. He returned with a small bag, the bell over the door still tinkling behind him. "One light bulb. Your porch deserves a little ceremony." "You did not need to do that." "I wanted to," he said, and there was no fanfare in it. On my porch, the rain turned to threads, and the air smelled like damp leaves and pavement. He looked at the fixture, then at the distance to the top step. "May I?" he asked, again, and I realized how much I trusted the way he asked. I held the bag while he twisted the old bulb free and pressed the new one in. When he flipped the switch, the bulb glowed that hopeful, butter-colored light that makes an old porch look like a page from a storybook. I wished I had washed the doormat, and then decided the light made the whole thing honest enough. This is where I live, imperfect and cared for. "Tea?" I asked. The word came out natural as breathing. Not because he bought a bulb, or because I was grateful for a coat, but because the conversation had been walking toward it since we left the building. "I'd like that," he said, and his voice softened, not in the cheap way people use to sound kind, but in the way someone sounds when a room finally matches the weather inside them. My kitchen is small, the good kind of small. Everything within reach, the kettle scarred by years of doing exactly what it was meant to do. I hung his coat on the chair with the steady leg, set 2 mugs on the counter, and wiped the water rings with that ridiculous dish towel my sister gave me that says you are doing fine. He noticed the tin on my windowsill. "Is that a recipe box?" he asked. "My mother's," I said. "Spaghetti sauce you don't mess with, and a cookie that will break every rule, including common sense." "I vote for cookies someday," he said, and sat where I could see him but not feel observed. That distinction matters when you are a woman who has spent years being useful in rooms where usefulness is sometimes mistaken for invisibility. While the kettle warmed, he traced a finger over the mug's handle, like he was reminding himself to slow down. "The slide you added," he said again. "It was brave. But I also noticed how you looked at me when I interrupted you earlier. That small look, disappointed and patient at the same time. You were right to give it. I didn't mean to overrun you." I turned to face him fully. "Thank you for saying that. It's fine. We were all jockeying for oxygen in there." "It isn't fine," he said gently. "We can be better than fine." He paused. Which brings me to the unmanagerial thing that might be the most managerial thing I've said in a while. I'd like to recommend you to lead the cross-training initiative. Officially. Title, budget, and authority to say no, if you want it. The kettle clicked off, and for a second it felt like it had announced the offer. I poured water over the tea bags, watched the leaves bloom into amber, and let myself breathe. "I do want it," I said. And then, because the truth had arrived and asked to be sat down and fed, I added, "But I also like this. Tea. Talking. The walk. I like feeling known by someone who sees what I can do." He didn't rush in with assurances. He watched my face the way you read something important, making sure you understand, not hunting for a loophole. "I like this too," he said. "And I want to be careful. If we keep walking and talking, if we keep making tea, I'll put a buffer in place at work. Sarah can handle your reviews. We'll be clear. I won't let your career be a casualty of my liking you." The way he said it, plain and brave, settled some old skittish bird in my chest. I carried him his mug and sat across from him without the table as a barricade. It felt more like a bridge. "I haven't done this in a long time," I said. "Not the tea. The naming of things before they get messy." "Me neither," he admitted. "But I'd like to try it that way. Slow on purpose. Respect first. If we ever take a step, it'll be a step we both see." Outside, the rain had softened into that delicate mist that makes the streetlights look taller. We let the silence lengthen, the good kind, braided with the sound of spoons tapping mug rims and the soft hum of the refrigerator working behind us. He told me about the hardware store again, about how his father kept a notebook of measurements in a pocket, doorways, windows, spaces that needed particular care. I told him about the notebook I keep in my purse, people's favorite teas, preferred chairs in meeting rooms, the birthdays no one advertises. He laughed that surprised laugh of recognition. "We're both the keepers of dimensions," he said. "Maybe that's why the walk felt right," I said. "We're good at measuring how much space something needs." His phone buzzed on the table. He turned it face down without looking, not to stage a point, but because that was the dimension the moment needed. I thought about how many dinners I'd attended with people whose phones were third guests, and how uncomplicated this felt by comparison. He finished his tea and set the mug down with the care of someone returning a borrowed book. "It's late," he said. "I should go, but I wanted to ask. I'd like to do this again." Not as your boss, not as anything that pushes, just as two people who pay attention. I walked him to the door, the porch light burning like it had been waiting for this exact hour to prove itself. He put his coat back on, then hesitated. "May I give you a hug good night?" he asked, the same way he'd asked about my elbow, the light bulb, the walk itself. "Yes," I said, and stepped into it. It was the kind of hug that keeps its own boundaries. Warm, steady, no performance, a punctuation mark at the end of an honest sentence. When we let go, he stepped back enough to see my face and gauge it, not to decode or take, just to register. I felt strangely taller, as if something inside me had decided to stand up and be counted. "Text me when you're home," I said, and then we both smiled at the obviousness. We were already home, each of us in our own way. "I'll text when my key turns," he said, and started down the steps. At the bottom, he turned. "Pamela?" "Yes." I meant it. Respect first. When the door clicked shut, the house felt slightly different. Not bigger, not smaller, but aligned. I washed the mugs, put the new light bulb's cardboard sleeve in the recycling, and wrote 2 things on a sticky note for tomorrow. Call Sarah. Buy spare bulbs. Then I wrote a 3rd thing, the kind of note you keep for yourself, because you've earned it. You are not invisible here. The phone buzzed. "Home," he wrote. "Thank you for the tea and the talk." I typed and erased twice. Then I sent. "Thank you for the walk and the light." In the bedroom, I set my alarm for the morning and tucked the day into the place where good days go, the place that isn't loud but lasts. Outside, the rain smoothed the street into a soft shine. Inside, I lay there thinking about measurements and memory, and about how sometimes the unexpected isn't fireworks or grand declarations. Sometimes it's a steady evening where someone sees you clearly, asks permission, and means what they say. And that was the surprise of the night, that I could be 52, tired, competent, hopeful, and still discover a new room inside myself simply by letting someone walk beside me. The morning after that walk, the office felt the same. Emails stacked high, phones chirping, the copier groaning like an old neighbor. But for me, something had shifted. It wasn't about romance, not yet, and maybe never in the way people expect. It was about being seen, and once you've been seen clearly, you can't slip back into invisibility without noticing the loss. Justin passed my desk around 10. He didn't linger, didn't break stride, but he set down a small paper cup of tea beside my keyboard. Chamomile. He'd remembered. "Cross-training proposal," he said in his usual voice, the one that never rushed anyone. "Whenever you're ready." And then he was gone down the hall. The tea steamed quietly, a secret between us. I opened a new document and started writing. Not just tasks and goals, but reasons. Why this mattered, why people needed to feel trusted with more than one role. I wrote with a kind of fire I hadn't felt in years. It was as though last night's rain had washed the dust off some part of me. By noon, Sarah stopped at my cubicle. She was always direct, her dark bob swinging like punctuation. "So I hear I'm taking over your reviews." She tilted her head. "Something you want to tell me?" I hesitated. The office was no place for confessions. "Justin wants me leading the initiative," I said. "It makes sense to shift the reporting." She studied me like she had her own theories, then nodded. "Congratulations. It's overdue." And then, softer, almost conspiratorial, "It's good to see you smiling again." That night, I walked out carrying my laptop bag heavier with drafts and lighter with possibility. Justin was waiting by the door. "Heading home?" "Yes," I said. "Though I should warn you," I replaced the porch bulb. "You'll be disappointed if you expected another ceremony." He chuckled. "I'll manage." The walk was easier this time, like we'd already paved the distance between us. We talked about nothing urgent. Books half read, the strange comfort of grocery stores late at night, how he burns toast no matter what setting he chooses. Somewhere between 7th and 8th, he stopped. "Pamela, are we sure about this?" His tone wasn't doubtful. It was careful, like setting glass on a shelf. "We're sure about the tea, the walks, the respect," I said. "The rest can wait." He let out a breath, relieved. "Good. Because I don't want to risk making you smaller in the eyes of this place. You deserve bigger." That word, bigger, settled in me. For so long I had been steady, reliable, invisible scaffolding. Bigger was not what people usually offered women past 50. But here was a man saying it like it was obvious, like the sky was blue. When we reached my block, the porch light shone down as if it approved. This time I invited him in without hesitation. I had cookies cooling on the counter, the kind that always collapse in the middle, but taste like childhood. We sat at the table, eating them while the rain pressed lightly at the windows again. It was the simplest evening, yet it felt like the continuation of a story neither of us had realized we'd started years ago. Every late meeting, every exchanged glance across